high. Yes. So let's see. Dum-dee-dum-dee-dum-dum-dum. Ginger ale. Gotta have some ginger ale. And what are we having? Oh, these are great. What am I eating? I think the fan's on a little high. Real air in here, but I'll go it this way. These are, see, everything fell on the floor because I have a fan on. There. Now, these are, what are these? Bite-size everything crackers. Trader Joe's, this is Trader Joe's thing. They're called everything crackers. They're everything. It was garlic, onion, sesame, poppy seed, caraway seed, just everything. They're delicious. They do sell them at Trader Joe's. My friend Steve Peters turned me on to these. Said, "You should get the everything crackers." Oh, they're a little addictive. They're tiny, so yeah. Let's just grab a couple. So, what day is it? I have presents in my lap because there's presents again. It's it is August 15th. The Assumption of the Virgin Mary. I don't know. August 15th, which is National Leathercraft Day. Ooh, I like that. I have like bracelets and things that like leathercraft. It's very cool. Leathercraft. So all you people punching holes in little leather things, this is your day. National Relaxation Day. Yeah, I've been having that all morning. I'm like, it's so hot. It is so hot today here in LA, in Tonga. It's crazy hot. There will be a lot of relaxing going on. I don't think, Bob went outside. He's gone out to drop off dry cleaning and get mail, but I hope he's okay, because it's like living on the surface of the sun out there right now. So I hope he's all right. That's where I'm staying in. It's National Lemon Meringue Pie Day. And I have crusts, and I have condensed milk, and I have lemons. I make Gladys Knight and the Pips lemon icebox pie. That's what the recipe's called. It's from how many people who are my age who got like the Scholastic thing, the Weekly Reader, and you ordered the books at school. Cool Cooking. It was like 1972. Recipes of your favorite rock stars. And Gladys Knight and the Pips lemon icebox pie is one of the best ones. So I will probably be making that today. Just saying. World Honeybee Day. Yes, very, very, very important, because there's been some problems, with bees. They're having problems that bees are colony collapse. They've had problems with bees dying, or just bees die, and it's awful. And they're trying to figure it out if it's a bacteria, a parasite, a chemical. There's something they're studying to see what it is. Something is killing a lot of bees. Now, I can tell you right now, it's not killing all the bees, because you go out in my yard, there's a tree over there. I don't even want to get too close, because I got a tree out here. You won't get within 6 feet, you hear. If everyone's looking for the bees, I have them. They're in a tree next to my house, which is great, because I grow tomatoes and things, and crops that need bees to like grow from. And I got bees. They're all out there. All the bees in the world that have disappeared are apparently hiding in my tree next to my house, which is great. It's great. That's why I'm not disturbing them, because we need bees. If you don't have bees, they don't fertilize plants. Plants, hence the birds and the bees lecture, and crops. The things that we eat every day will not grow if you do it. So it is very, very important to have bees, and the bees have been having a lot of trouble lately. But I can say the bees are alive and well and hiding in Tahunga. So yay. Things. I love lemon meringue pie. So many things. Beautiful letter here. I'm not reading the whole thing. No. This is very personal. Jennifer, you know who you are, Jennifer. Wrote me a very, very beautiful letter. And she sent things. In this day and age, the best gift, of course, nowadays, to send someone is a lovely, well-made mask. Look at it with the lace! And this little top thing that goes with the nose. The little lace, very Nellie Oleson. Oh, my ears. They need to be thicker. But you say, are they a little loose? Well, we can make them tighter, because she made a couple of them. Not only did she send me this, and I'm totally wearing this, is she made... What is that? It has little buttons, and you put this on, then here, in, I did it wrong, in the back. So you attach. You see, I do this, I like customize my masks. I put like a button on them, or I tighten the strings. I do stuff So you put the string on the little button there, and then you just bring that around, and you get that strapped on there. Now, get that on there good. Oh, I did. And then now, not only now is the mask comfortably secure, very comfortable, not too tight, not too loose, right on there. I have a bow and ringlets on the back of my head. That is the silliest thing absolutely ever. That is genius. And the scary thing is, I will go to the supermarket with this on my face and this on the back of my head. I'll do it. I'll do it, because I'm like crazy. So Miss Jennifer, she, not to exclude anyone, she made for Dean Almanzo. And yes, I am totally sending these to Dean Butler. He is going to crack up. Dean will love these. She made these very farmery, masculine Almanzo farmer boy, lovely, blue-checked, good, manly farmer boy masks for Dean Butler. And yes, he will get these. That is hysterical. Okay. Jennifer. Yes, thank you. It's a Morticia size. We'll put it on Morticia or even on Roswell. I like my mask. I do. And thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer, also a well-placed kitchen chair. So, just saying. We are up to chapter 10. Now, Laura's grown up. We've gotten to what Bill Anderson is working our way through here. And we've already gotten through 9, which was teaching, courtship, and marriage. And we are now into, she is now a homesteader's wife. And I have a house and home of my own. Now, initially, she was kind of putting it off. They weren't going to get married right away. But crazy Liza Jane wanted to throw this terrible bridezilla over the top wedding. And they were like, oh my God, we got to get married right now. Because crazy lady is going to, mess up our wedding. So they ran out and got married. So they are now married, and remember, she wasn't really keen on being a farmer's wife, because she likes to travel, and she wants to be Miss Pioneer. So she indeed is a little not sure about staying put. Although, as she said, she likes the idea of being home. She liked all the home with her family, the hanging. She liked all the cooking and the cleaning and the ironing and the twisting. She liked all that stuff, twisting hay into sticks. She liked hay, climbing the hay things, but she liked that. She liked being with her family. She didn't really like the teaching. She didn't really like going away. She liked traveling with her family. Like, as she said, well, if I get my husband, maybe we'd go west. But she liked all of that wifey stuff of having to keep the wagons and keep the horses. And she loved cows. She liked milking cows. You couldn't. I'm not sure what you'd have to do to talk me into milking a cow. Not milking a cow. This is, someone said, this is a biography, Laura Ingalls Wilder by William Anderson. It's Bill Anderson's awesome. So, we want to see the world. She's still pushing for the pioneering thing happening. I was a little awed at my new estate, Laura said of the farm home where she lived with Manly after the wedding. The Wilder land began a mile straight north of the cement, so it's not far. It's not far from home. And he's a lot better off than her pa was when Caroline married him. I'm just saying, he's much better off. Inside of the usual quarter section of 160 acres, homestead land, which is a lot, Manly had filed on 2 quarter sections. The section was a tree claim farther north. The government allowed settlers simultaneous second claims if they planted 10 acres of the land with young trees. You could double up for the price of one if you did trees. Trees are good. Okay. On Manly's tree claim were the required acres of cottonwoods, elms, and box elders that were thriving when the building of Wilder's first house was completed. One day the trees would shade and cool the little house, and that was the whole thing. There were no trees on the prairie, and the idea was encouraging people to plant some trees, and to get a little forest going. So what's the book again? Bill, just Google up William Anderson, Bill Anderson, William T. Anderson. He writes all the best Laura Ingalls stuff. He really knows his stuff. He's very, very, very nice man. There you go. So he had the trees. Laura was pleased with the house that her husband had built. It was a neat little frame house, painted a soft gray. That's kind of modern and fashionable. Windows in the living room, bedroom, and kitchen let in the sunlight and views of the green prairie and the blue sky overhead. Laura quickly felt at home and was delighted when she discovered a wonderful cabinet in her pantry. Almanzo had made himself. Drawers and cupboards were expertly fitted to provide Laura with spaces for every need. As a married woman, Laura knew she would now have to manage her housekeeping as skillfully as Ma always had. Yes, she talked about in her books that although she loved it, she was a little freaked out after a couple of weeks when she realized, oh wait, Ma's not here. The stuff I was doing, I was like second in command. I was helping Ma, but Ma had arranged all the cupboards and the thing and was doing it and already knew all the recipes, and Ma's not here. I'm having to literally do all of this stuff now, and that kind of freaked her out. She's like, I had no idea there was this much work. I know, there's a lot of, she had no idea how much her Ma had done, and totally freaked. But Almanzo knew that Laura was really short. Was she like 4'11", she was a teeny little thing, and he built in the middle of the shelves, he custom made the shelves in the pantry and the cupboard to her height. She didn't have to get on a step ladder, stand on her tiptoe, or call Almanzo, okay, honey, can you get the thing? It was all like right there. So he's very sweet. He's very sweet. And it's already nice. Remember all these descriptions of like where Ma and Pa lived. Pa took Ma to live in a hole in the ground in a dugout, and there was that shanty claim that was covered in tar paper, and then even the little house was like, oh, look, we have a window. Here, day one, Almanzo has a nice house with windows and a roof and a thing and a pantry. So she's married up. I'm just saying, just a little bit. After the wedding, Manly decided to put more of his land into cultivation immediately. With over 300 acres, he could raise bountiful crops. That is a lot. That is a lot. Back then, I guess they were like, oh yeah, that's fine. I mean, do you know anybody who has 300 acres right now? I don't know anyone with 300 acres. He could raise bountiful crops. He and Laura discussed plans for the farm together. Manly valued Laura's ideas, and they decided to approach wheat farming on the prairie as a team. Laura quickly found her contribution was meager. When she sent eggs to town with Manly to trade, they brought just 5 cents a dozen, and no one wanted her butter at any price. What was wrong with her butter? Maybe everybody had a cow. There was too much butter. I don't know, that she couldn't sell her butter. Was that 5 cents a dozen? Brown eggs are 3 cents less a dozen. But yes, they did it as a team, and that's something in all of the writing, in her books, in all the historical writings. Just like in last chapter when they said, none of this obeys stuff, that even Almanzo and the preachers said, yeah, none of this obey. That Laura and Almanzo were very much a team. They were there was none of this, well, I'm the farmer and you're just the wife. She was out there breaking the sod. She was, super duper, superwoman of the 1800s. And they had both agreed on that. So that's cool. It took money in quite some amount to get started on a farm there at that time, Laura remembered, when she thought over the first years the Wilders spent on the Dakota farm. There was expensive machinery to buy. Horses were needed to power the field machines, and horses needed plenty of feed as well as shelter. It's very expensive to run a farm. Sometimes men had to be hired to help Manly, especially at harvest time. Though they disliked it, the Wilders' debts mounted. Even the little gray house was mortgaged for $500. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, on the show, it's all just Ma, Pa, and the kids. And in the books, they sometimes make it all up. But then every now and then, even in the middle of nowhere in Kansas. And then he hired these guys to come in and do threshing. It's like, oh, where'd they come from? So they're constantly hiring people or getting hired by other people. So this all alone on the prairie. No, can't do it. Not even them. That's why a lot of people do have trouble with the farming. A lot of people want to farm now, and it's really hard. You can do it, but it does take more than like one person. People have this image from movies and TV that they could just get themselves, their Ma and Pa, and their kids, and grow acres of food and not have anyone else come over, and it will work. You will drop dead of exhaustion because even the Ingalls, who are portrayed as being terribly, terribly self-sufficient by themselves and were remarkably self-sufficient in many ways, constantly had people come in and help. So there you go. there was always the hired girl, the thresher men, and then people would come with a machine, and it wasn't all by hand. There was that guy who had the machine, and they'd come over. So I'm gonna do it all by myself by hand. Yeah, probably. Yeah, no, even Ma let Pa buy her a sewing machine. So hard to do. Very hard work. To save the cost of paying a hired man, Laura often helped Manly with the farm work because she liked that. She's always in the hay. That girl. I learned to do all kinds of farm work with machinery, she said. I have ridden the binder driving 6 horses. Though their work was hard, Manly and Laura believed that their acres of rich prairie land would one day produce for them lavishly. They had the hope and patience of a farmer and the belief that next year would be better than the one before, which you've got to have, generally, and especially if you're a farmer. When their work was done, and on Sundays, Manly and Laura had happy times. They visited their friends in De Smet, or their friends drove out to the tree claim for meals and conversation. They attended concerts and church socials in town, and often visited Pa and Ma and the girls on the homestead. Yet they called them the home folk. It was very funny in the book. We're going to go see not her family, the home folk. Often, one of Laura's favorite memories of her early married life was the horseback rides she and Manly shared. See, I think she was rough and tumble. She wanted to go ride horses. In their stable were 2 swift ponies, Trixie and Fly. I love those names. Trixie and Fly. Sometimes, before breakfast, Manly and Laura would saddle the horses and ride off across the prairie. Laura learned to imitate a cowboy yell that set her Trixie off like a streak. I think that's from By the Shores of Silver Lake. Remember, it was By the Shores of Silver Lake, and there was that girl, and the 2 of them would sneak off and go riding when they were supposed to be delivering laundry. And that girl was like, whoopee! And they were yelling and screaming and riding them horses and going crazy. She picked it up from her. But that's right, Laura was wild. Here she is, a married woman. Well, I mean, she's like 18, but a married woman. And she's riding bareback and going, yee-haw! That's our girl. Yep. Setting her Trixie off like a streak. Often Laura had to stop her horse while Manly and Fly caught up to them. The Wilders took their usual long buggy rides together during the spring of 1886. On Sunday afternoons, they rode far over the greening prairies. June was always Laura's favorite month on the prairie because it was the time when the wild roses bloomed. Oh, the low bushes of pink and red blossoms colored the land, and the sweet scent of flowers filled the warm air. Laura and Manly were expecting their first child, and the rose-covered land suggested a name to Laura. See? Rose Wilder Lane? She could have been Daisy. Turnip. We'll look back, see what the cats are doing. Yep. Rose. Think of the things that poor child could have gotten named. Swamp flower, Wilder Lane. As they wondered about names for their baby, and Manly pointed out they needed to wait and see if a boy or a girl was born, Laura abruptly settled the matter. It will be a girl, and we will call her Rose, she said. She knew. You know, some mothers know. Some mothers know. You're not supposed to be able to know. We have all the modern technology now, but there's always been people who go, yeah, I completely know. Was it the baby, it sits lower or higher or something when it's a boy or girl? But she knew. That summer of 1886 was a bumper season for more than wild roses. Crops grew lush and promising. Yay. Manly said he'd never seen such wheat. Laura estimated that their wheat crop would bring $3,000. It's an insane, huge amount of money to them. They could pay their taxes, pay for their house, pay off the farm machinery, and still be rich. One hot August day, just before Manly planned to harvest the wheat, the sky darkened, and great sweeps of hail pounded the land. From their house, the Wilders watched breathlessly as the storm increased. When it was over, they realized their crop was gone. The grain was pounded into the wet ground. The wheat field was ruined. With their baby due in December and expenses mounting, Laura and Manly knew they must reorganize their plans. They found that they could mortgage their homestead land to raise money to pay some of their bills. But the bank required that they live on the homestead land, which was a short distance from the tree claim. They improved the shanty on that homestead land, and on their first wedding anniversary, they closed the little gray house and moved. The shanty stood on top of a long sloping hill. From its top, Laura could see De Smet to the south and the Wessington Hills to the west, Spirit Lake to the south, and Silver Lake to the east. So on the one hand, boo hiss, they had to leave the fabulous honeymoon cottage and move to the little shack in the homestead. But Almanza fixed it up and had a view. All four sides. She had a view of the lake, a view of the lake, she had a view. So she had a view. So she moved to the smaller place with a better view. So, but yes, just as things were picking up, and I remember reading this in the first 4 years. It was like every 10 pages, something awful happened. It was very sad. But she got a view. She got a view. Manly improved the homestead, oh good, during the fall and made plans for next year's crops. Mostly, Laura sat quietly in her rocking chair, waiting for the birth of the baby. Just as Laura had predicted, the baby was a girl. On the night of December 5th, 1886, Rose Wilder was born. She was a healthy, big baby. Ma stayed a few days to help, and then a hired girl came to work for Laura for a while. But for most of the winter, Manly, Laura, and Rose were alone in the cozy, isolated shanty on the prairie. So now, see, there's a lot of young mothers out there saying, go do it all myself, and a husband is working, they're going to... Laura Ingalls Wilder, pioneer woman, had her mom and a hired girl to help her when the baby was born. Just saying, childcare, yeah, it's totally a thing. The most independent woman in the world, and her mother and a hired girl came over, so... It's not wrong to ask for help when you've had a baby. Laura did it. And she even had Manly there. She still had her mother come over and a hired girl. So there you go. Although I remember she sent the hired girl away in the other book because she wasn't very good. And so they wound up alone. Laura and Manly's dreams of a strong crop in 1887 did not come true. Because of hot winds and dry weather, the crops were meager. That summer, some of the hay crop and the barn burned in a mysterious fire. When I was reading the book, I was like, now another terrible, horrible thing. It's just like awful. Yeah, and there in the book, the house burns down. So let's see which thing here burns down. That summer, some of the hay crop, okay, so then that burned. Laura worried and sometimes wondered if they should give up farming. But Manly was more patient and believed they could be successful. Pa and Ma had wearied of trying to farm their homestead. At Christmas time in 1887, they moved to De Smet permanently. Pa built a comfortable little house for the family on 3rd Street, not far from the church and close to the school Carrie and Grace attended. Pa still did most of the carpentry jobs in town. He and Ma lived in De Smet for the rest of their lives and never moved again. Yay! Poor Pa and Ma with the moving. But there you go. All that Pa farming, and it was always some kind of disaster. It never quite worked. But he was really great at carpentry. And he was apparently very good at being the justice of the peace and on the school board. He was a town guy. Every time he did town stuff, like justice of the peace or school board or all these kind of stuff, he was great. And when he, did carpentry or built something, it was fine. Worked in a store, it's great. It was like no problem. He'd go out and farm and they'd lose money. So they finally moved into town. They became very much town people. And if you go to De Smet, they will show you all the buildings and the stores and all the stuff that the Ingalls built and how lovely and successful they were in town. And there's a very fancy little cemetery where they're all there. Charles and Caroline, the whole gang. And it's lovely. It's very pretty, very fancy. And it's fancy cemetery, just saying. Little Rose was quickly whisked to Pa's house during the winter of 1888. Laura and Manly contracted diphtheria, and for weeks they lay sick while Rose was safe in town. Royal Wilder nursed Laura and Manly as best he could, but their recovery was slow. Okay, diphtheria, super serious, bad disease. A vaccine has been developed. There's treatments for it now, but diphtheria kill you. My mother... I don't remember. I said my mother was born a long time, born in 1922. And my Auntie Marion, who took me to the set, lovely one, was much older. There was a sister between them. Was going to be. By the time my mother was born, there was just Marion. Marion had a younger sister named Jean, would have been my Aunt Jean, had she lived. But there was a diphtheria epidemic, massive, when she was about 9 years old. They couldn't do anything. She died. She died at 9 years old from diphtheria. And this was before they could do anything. And Grandpa, my grandfather was a doctor. I mean, he was OB-GYN, he delivered babies, but he was a doctor, and he was devastated. I mean, as you can imagine, you're a doctor, and your child dies of a disease that you can't do anything about. And just a few years later, they came up with vaccines and treatments and things for diphtheria, and so he was very, very devastated. And then my mother was born a few years after that, so yikes. Diphtheria is awful. People used to die of it all the time. So actually, for 1888, the fact that Lauren Almanzo got diphtheria out there on the prairie at that time period and lived was huge. It was huge, huge that they did not die. So someone said, should make a family tree of you and Bob. We're on that ancestry thing. Oh, we go. Bob is Richard Gere's 7th cousin. We haven't met. But yeah, yes, you die. So they were very smart, actually, to send the poor baby over to Ma and Pa's place in town, because the baby wouldn't have made it. Rose wouldn't have made it if she got the diphtheria. And it's a miracle that they did. Manly was the most seriously affected and partially paralyzed by the illness. Now, like Mary, where they said Mary wasn't the scarlet fever, it was the meningitis, or she may have had a stroke. It looks like Almanzo may have had a stroke. It might have been the diphtheria, but also he may have had a stroke as complications from the diphtheria, because these things happen. Do you own any gerbils? No, I do not own any gerbils. They're cute. I don't have any gerbils, and neither did Richard Gere. Things you people come. I know that story. It's not true. It's not true. He was his feet. When he could leave the sickbed, he moved painfully. His feet were partially lame, and with great difficulty he shuffled and struggled to walk. I think it was a stroke, because it's almost like a Parkinson's thing. And I don't know, like diphtheria does stuff. I don't know. I think he had a stroke. I think because these people had fevers, and there was nothing to reduce fever, and they would go on and on and on until they'd get deathly ill. So yes, it was real, and he was young man, Almanzo at this point. So his feet are lame. His great difficulty, shuffled and struggled to walk. Even his hands were affected, and he had been a vigorous 30-year-old man before the sickness came, and after it left, he worked constantly to regain his strength and his ability to run the farm. Now, he worked his way through it. In fact, he wound up making himself sicker, and in fact, they think that's maybe why he had the stroke, because he wouldn't stop working. And he kept saying, go to bed, go to bed. It's like, no. So, don't know. But the poor guy. And he wound up regaining the use of his hands and feet, but very slowly. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Often Laura left her own work in the house to help Manly with some task his clumsy fingers could no longer do. Yes, he had that that thing with the fingers, small object, that sort of, the dexterity. Couldn't do it, couldn't button things. I think. But it's like Parkinson's. That's like when my dad had Parkinson's, and very difficult. Terrible, terrible, terrible. He could drive the team with the plow, but he could no longer hitch up the horses. See, it's the small motor skills. He could drive the team, but it's getting the thing. So it's like, it's really weird. So it's like, what do they call it? Parkinsonism, when you don't have Parkinson's, but you have severe, it's like post-stroke symptoms will absolutely do that kind of damage. So Almanzo really, it's pretty severe. Terrible, terrible. He could drive the team, but he couldn't hitch up the horses. The 320 acres of land were too much for Manly to farm. A buyer purchased the homestead quarter, and the Wilders moved back to the tree claim and the little gray house. Yeah, here they have this huge thing that was going to, make them all this money, where they had the trees and the thing, and then he has diphtheria and a stroke, and he can't do it. I mean, if as a strong 30-year-old man with a couple of hired guys, maybe you could work that much land and make a profit. But now, very, very bad. With weather conditions so uncertain and the outcome of their crops so unpredictable, Laura and Manly talked of raising sheep on the farm. Laura's cousin, Peter Ingalls, had moved to De Smet. He offered to be the Wilders' partner. Oh, good. And so together they bought 100 Shropshire sheep. You say that 3 times fast. Shropshire sheep. Peter lived with the Wilders and was a great help to Manly, who was still weak. Thank heavens Peter moved in. I was reading that in the book, and boy, oh boy. So Peter really saved the day. And the sheep, that was smart. The sheep didn't require as much effort, and except the shearing, and then you bring people in. The sheep was very, very helpful. There you go. Yep, diphtheria vaccine available in 1930. Yeah. So terrible. Peter lived with the Wilders and was a great help to Manly, who was still weak. And when you read Laura's book, he did everything. He helped Laura around the house. He did everything. The growing season in 1889 was a dry one. Longingly, Laura and Manly looked up at the sky, hoping to see signs of rain. The tree claim planting struggled to survive, along with the garden and field crops. For weeks, the winds were so hot that they burned the wheat and oat crops until they died. Ooh! How I wish it would rain, Laura's sister Grace mourned in her diary. And Laura spoke of how heartbreaking it was to watch the grain we had sown with such hope wither and yellow in the hot winds. Although the weather had destroyed the crops, the Wilders still had something to look forward to. They expected a new baby in August. The baby was born on a hot afternoon, a boy. He looked just like Manly, Grace Ingalls observed, but he did not live. It's like Freddie Ingalls all over again. On August 10th, 1889, the De Smet newspaper reported that Mr. and Mrs. A.J. Wilder's little child died Wednesday evening. Terrible. The Wilders' baby boy was buried in an unmarked grave in the De Smet cemetery. He had no name. Laura's feelings were so numbed and sorrowful, she hardly wanted anyone to mention her son to her. Rose was too young to remember her brother, but she did not know that my mother wanted nothing said about it. I think she never stopped grieving, and it was her way to be silent about an unhappy subject. Well, remember when she did the books, she didn't even talk about her brother Freddie dying. She left that out of the books. It's in the history, it was in the show. And so, she did not like talking about it, and, Baby Wilder, and what did they call the episode when we did the show, when we had the child with no name, when Doc Baker has to tell us. Terrible, but this is, the 1800s. Oh, yeah, here someone saying, like a mortality rate, like 12%. Babies died all the time, unfortunately. Really, up until, like, the 1950s. Children died. It was very hard. It was hard being a baby. And in the 1800s, there was like no cure for anything. So babies died a lot. It was really awful. But imagine she'd already been so hurt when her baby brother Freddie died, to have her little boy die after all that. Yeah, she probably took it really hard. I can see where that was probably very, very, very traumatic for Laura. And how hard on little Rose. She was a baby, but she was old enough to know she was getting a baby brother. She was old enough to see him, and she was old enough to know she was getting a brother. And she's certainly old enough to know that her mother was devastated and very sad. It's very hard on the two. Laura felt she only wanted to rest after the baby's death. Rose was nearly 3 and could help with simple chores, including feeding the stove with hay sticks. Wait, the stove? And she's 3? Again, okay, here we are. So we had Laura working in a hotel, waiting tables and making beds at 11. And now the 3-year-old is tending a stove. The open fire wood burning stove. Now, I know people who quite rightly would tell their 6 or 7-year-olds to please stay away from the stove. And this is fancy new stoves, good, gas, electric ranges that have safety features. But most people, if their kid's learning about to cook and work on a stove, maybe 8, 7, with adult supervision. Now, I learned to cook, I must have been 5 or 6, and my father had me stand on a chair, but next to my dad, and he showed me how to do stuff. I was allowed to use the stove with an adult right there next to me, up until like about, 8 or 9, baking and stuff. They'd let me bake things, but usually there's somebody around. I didn't think I really used a stove without direct adult supervision until like 10 or so. And even then it was like baking things. and that was a modern stove with safety features. This is a wood-burning stove, a big metal thing that anywhere you touch it, you will get third-degree burns. The stove itself becomes like red hot. It is full of burning, open-flame wood, and she's having a child do the hay sticks and put them into the burning fire, which I guess 10, 12, she's 3. This is like, don't play with matches. The 3-year-old is tending the large wood-burning, open-fire hot stove. They were very brave in the 1800s. I don't think anybody could tell their 3-year-old, can you go stoke the fireplace up, would you? Here's some wood. Get the poker to the kid, the 3-year-old, have him go stoke up the fireplace. That is crazy. Okay. Rose was 3 and could help with simple chores, including feeding the stove with hay sticks. One afternoon, Rose was fueling the stove when the hay in her arms caught fire. Yes, because she's 3, and that's why you don't do that. She dropped the burning hay, and almost immediately, the kitchen was ablaze. Laura could only scramble out of the burning house with Rose. She was too weak to fight the fire. By the time neighbors saw the flames, and Manly rushed in from the fields, the house was burning uncontrollably. Oh, look, it's Bob. Hello. Hello. We got to the part where the house is on fire. It's great. Only a few things were saved. Laura's wedding silver and some clothes and dishes. Now, if you recall, in her version of this, in First 4 Years, the kitchen caught fire mysteriously. She was cooking and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's it. Turned my back for a minute, I walked to the kitchen, and there was a fire. We couldn't put it out. The truth is, she lay in bed and had a 3-year-old go start the stove and tend the fire in the wood-burning stove, and not terribly surprisingly, there was a horrible accident, and the house caught fire. Nowadays, we would say, well, yeah, because you had a 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old could have been burned to death or clothes caught fire, for heaven's sakes. Notice that's not in the books, but that's what happened. Oops-a-daisy, she had the 3-year-old working the fire, because they thought that was totally normal, and it didn't go well. And the reason her silver got saved was because their crazy, goofy neighbor, climbed in the window in the back and started just throwing stuff out the window as fast as he could. So the silver got saved. Wow. So, that's terrible. So they got the wedding silver and clothes and dishes. Oh, they got the plate, the famous bread plate that's in the museum. Both the farming venture and now the happy little home where the Wilders had started their married life were in ruins. And they're lucky the 3-year-old's alive. Sorry, and not 3rd-degree burns. Manly hastily constructed a shanty for the family to live in near the fire-blackened hole where the house had been. Yeah, they just built right next to it. But he and Laura were planning to leave Dakota. Manly had never fully recovered his health. And with the beginning of another drought season, he could see little hope in continued farming. His father's farm in Minnesota was flourishing, and extra help was always needed there. So Manly and Laura decided to make a long visit to Spring Valley in the spring of 1890. Now, this is a running theme. Remember, the Ingalls relatives, again, eastern Minnesota, not western Minnesota, Charles's brother, they were doing great. And they actually went there after the grasshopper plague. And same thing here. Almanza's family go, yeah, we're fine. You want to come to our farm? So this whole branch of the family is maybe this west thing's not going so hot. Yeah, I can tell you. The Wilder sheep were sold for $500. The sheep purchase, I said the sheep purchase was a good idea when I read it in her book. They were sold $500. The money went half to the Wilders and half to Peter Ingalls. Manly readied a covered wagon for the trip east. Laura and Manly packed their few possessions. It's easier to pack when you had a fire and lost everything. Told Rose all about Minnesota, where they were going, over and over. While her parents packed, Rose repeated the syllables. Minnesota. So cute. The Wilders said goodbye to Laura's family. As Pa's family had done in Walnut Grove, the Wilders were back trailing to the east, and they hoped to find life easier. Laura rode her pony part of the way on the long trip across eastern South Dakota and Minnesota. Laura and Manly and Rose were welcomed kindly into the big Wilder farmhouse in Spring Valley. There's a note. In 1889, the Dakota Territory had been granted statehood, and the land was now divided into North and South Dakota. In Dakota Territory to that. Laura grew to love Manly's father and mother. Well, we read Farmer Boy. They're very nice. Her father and mother, who did all they could to make things comfortable for their guests. Rose became a great favorite among the Wilder relatives and friends. Manly, Laura, and Rose spent over a year with the Wilders. Hey, gee, I don't remember this in the books, do you? I said this somehow got left out. Then it was suggested that Manly should try a warmer, milder climate to improve his poor health. Yes, it's a good idea. Well, Laura's cousin Peter, who seems to be up to constantly, cousin Peter knows what's what. Cousin Peter had settled in Florida following a trip he had made down the Mississippi. Peter had married a southern girl and lived in the Florida panhandle near a village called Westville. He wrote to the Wilders, praising the warm weather, the pine forest, and the opportunities of Florida homesteading. Manly and Laura decided to follow Peter to Florida. Oh, look, this is not in the books. What happened? Wait, they were in DeSmet, then they were on this claim, then everything goes awful, and it gets awful, then there's this huge gap, then there's this diary that Rose publishes where they're in DeSmet, and they take a wagon to Missouri. Yet somehow, they spend a year at his parents', and now they're going to Florida. When did that? Laura, stop leaving things out. Okay. That's a good idea. They go to Florida. Well, you wouldn't have to deal with the winters and the freezing to death and the hay sticks, would you, in Florida? Just thinking. Manly auctioned off his horses, livestock, and remaining possessions in Spring Valley, and in the fall of 1891, the Wilders were ready to travel again. They decided to journey by train, which would be Rose's first experience on the railroad. Well supplied with boxes of food and parting presents from the Wilder relatives, Laura and Manly and Rose boarded the train for the South. Neither Laura nor Manly had ever seen a place like the Florida backwoods. Well, yes, no, they'd been way up north with the wind, the snow, and the thing, and the prairie, and they thought the Florida to be like another planet. Gray moss dripped off the trees. Scrubby pines grew up from the red-tinged earth. Laura described it as a land where the trees always murmur, where butterflies are enormous, where plants that eat insects grow in moist places, and yes, alligators inhabit the slowly moving waters of the rivers. But a Yankee woman was more of a curiosity than any of these. When the Wilders were settled, the neighbors viewed them with suspicion. Laura was seen as a haughty, up-north gal, and even Cousin Peter's wife disliked her. Laura kept Rose protectively close to her at all times. She concealed a revolver in her shirt pocket for safety. Well, the alligators, for heaven's sakes. You know, that's weird. They thought she was out. I mean, here's this farm girl who's out riding horses and baling hay, and in the South, they saw her as too uppity and snooty. What would they have thought if Nellie Oleson had shown up? Good heavens. Perhaps Manly, perhaps, we don't know, perhaps, we're guessing at this point, worked in the lumbering camps near Westville, or perhaps he simply rested and tried again to regain his strength. It's more than likely. The southern climate, though, made Laura ill. The dampness and heat drained her and made her long for high-level prairies. So it didn't work out very well. So after less than a year in Florida, the Wilders decided to go home. That's why she'd mention it, because it wasn't even a year. They went down there, got really hot, humid, and sick, and they bailed. They knew that South Dakota was still in a drought cycle, but the homestead land was still there, and friends and family. So in August of 1892, they packed their few belongings and boarded the train for home. Manly, Laura, and Rose were welcome at the Ingalls home. They visited there a while before they moved into a house a block away. Manly worked when he could, doing carpentry or painting or clerking in his brother Royal's store. He could do that. Pa also had a store called Ingalls and Company. There's a spin-off. Why are we not doing that television series? Why is that not a TV show? Why is Ingalls and Company not a show about Charles running a store in the town? Oh, man. Wouldn't you want to see that? Wouldn't you want to see that? I would do that in a heartbeat. Ingalls and Company, and sometimes he needed help when he drove his peddler's wagon into the countryside to sell to farmers. Okay, I'm producing this. Come on. A TV, Ingalls and Company, and it's Charles in town, and everybody's grown up, and then he has a peddler's wagon that he goes on traveling trips to other towns. Oh, there's a show here. Someone option this and shoot this right now. Laura found work at the dressmakers for $1 a day. While her parents worked, Rose spent the day at the Ingalls home. She sat with Ma and Mary in the parlor and learned to knit and sew and drink cambric tea. She was 5 when she was admitted to the DeSmet school and surprised everyone with her talent and enthusiasm for reading and writing. I'm sure no surprise to anyone else. The Wilders' dream of wheat farming was finished. Manly and Laura talked and planned. They needed to find a climate where intense cold would not plague Manly's crippled feet. They needed to farm on a small scale. And somewhere, I guess, where it wasn't so hot that then Laura was going to get sick, because they had, too hot, too cold. It's like Goldilocks here. They heard about a land development in the Ozark Mountains of southern Missouri. Land companies circulated glossy pictures of orchards, fat cattle, tree-covered hills, and rushing streams. That's advertising, you never know. Missouri seemed to be a land of promise. A neighbor from DeSmet went to the Ozarks to look things over. He brought back a Missouri apple and gave it to Laura. It was the biggest, reddest apple she'd ever seen. That apple decided where the Wilder family would settle next. So, apparently, the brochures weren't totally lying. She had someone actually go and check it out. It was good. When their friends heard the Wilders were moving again, they wondered and worried. The drought would end sometime, they guessed. Why did the Wilders travel so much? An old school friend of Laura's came to see her. She asked why Laura and Manly were going to Missouri. Laura did not explain all the reasons. She could not bear to tell again all the hardships she and Manly had endured since their marriage. All she could answer was, "We want to see the world." That's a good answer. So that's when, land of the big red apple is what they called Missouri then, because people saw. Now, apparently the brochures were not completely lying. I don't know if I believed all that, pretty shiny stuff there. But they did have lovely apples, as their friend was able to prove to them. So they did go, but if you notice, like in the book, totally, they're on the farm in the first 4 years, everything goes wrong, and then suddenly there's this diary of going to Missouri, and they're still on the farm. Oh, it's terrible, so after the fire and the crop failure and everything terrible, we packed up and went to Missouri. We went and lived for over a year at the in-laws in Minnesota, and then we went to Florida with the other relatives for almost a year. Then we moved back and moved in with the parents for like a year or two. Then we went to Missouri. So this lineage, timelines, locations. So Laura sort of fudged on the little details, but in this case, understandably so. I mean, it was the crop failure and Alonzo having a stroke and babies dying. So, you're going to leave that out. So Bob is here and staring at me. Yes, you want something. Oh, something has arriven in the mail. Did that just come now? This just in! What is this? What is it? Oh, that is my gift. So, in there it's to Alison from Rachel. So, Rachel had requested an autograph picture. I did an autograph picture for someone, said, could you do an autograph Nellie picture for Rachel? And apparently it was a hit because she is, this Rachel person, is in her full prairie dress. Yellow with little flowers and lace, much like a Nellie dress, and a yellow bonnet, and has her autograph picture of me. So this just appeared. Like, how flippin' cute is that? So, yes. So that is adorable. That just came in. So yeah, you guys, that was poor Laura. Poor Laura. That's the thing. She left stuff out because she wanted, like, reasonably happy stories. And so things kept getting hard. But she did skip stuff. And that's, it's difficult for people who are really into the whole idea of homesteading and farming. That's why it sort of makes it hard. They go, well, I read the Little House books, man. And yeah, totally. I can totally do it. I read the Little House books, and and it's like, so yeah. So what you mean is you want to farm and then lose everything and go move in with your relatives for a year and then come back, because that's what actually happened. Since that got left out, people often don't grasp the reality of how just mind-numbingly difficult it was to farm, and in the 1800s. Without the modern equipment, without the modern medical care, without the modern really anything that we have, and how difficult it was. And it was awful. It was hard. And so we romanticize these things in books and TV shows, but man, it was brutal. I mean, I told you, my father grew up on the farm. My mother was in Vancouver in the city with the doctor for the dad, very, very Nellie Oleson, very private school, whereas my father was out milking cows and shoveling snow on the prairie in Saskatchewan. And he said it was murder. It was murder. And he had lots of brothers and sisters, and they had a successful farm. It was the Great Depression, but his family had a very successful farm, and people, in fact, came to them for money and food because they were doing okay. but it was brutal. He said, no, I wouldn't do that again. Yes, for those of you who were saying, which book? It's called A Biography, Laura Ingalls Wilder, by William Anderson. That's the cover. It's very great. William Anderson. Yes, he's great. He's great. And there's also, so we are going to get to Missouri, and all kinds of good stuff's going to happen. And then what's great about this is he talks about how she started writing the books and how it all came to be. So there you are. Please do take care of yourselves. Wash your hands, wear your masks, and or have them made for you. And do take care of each other. And can Bob tell Ken to buy me a new stove, please? They're having a sale at Best Buy. They are. They're having a sale at Best Buy. Very good price. It's very good prices to get a stove. Cheap. I'm telling you. So take care of yourselves and call your friends and check in on them. And right now, I don't know where you're living, but there's a lot of heat waves scattered around the country, and it is ridiculous hot here. So try to stay in. If you don't have air conditioning, have a fan. Hydrate. Drink lots of water so you don't get sick, and take care of yourself. So see you tomorrow. Bye.